Hey, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Let's Talk About It. This is Susan Johnson, and I'm here with my co host, Dennis O'Brien. And if we got a wonderful guest for you, someone who represents us out here in Eastern Connecticut, State Representative Pat Boyd. Thank you so much for joining us, Pat. We're so happy to have you here.
Hi, Susan. Hi, Dennis. How are you?
Hey, Pat, how you doing? You know, Pat, I know you longer than Susan has.
That's true.
That's true. I'm gonna explain that later when Susan finishes talking.
All right. Yeah. So you are representing the House District 50. I'm 49,
Right.
and you're 50.
That's right. That's right.
And you have been doing amazing work at the Capitol. You're currently the chairman of the Public Safety Committee, which is a really important committee for us for public safety. And you know, Dennis has a little connection with that because he oversees the public safety here in Willimantic, the taxing district here. So,
well, I don't, I'm not that powerful. I'll explain it later.
Well, yeah, we'll certainly talk about it on Let's Talk About It. That's
Well,
what we do.
I appreciate both of you having me on. We've talked about it for a long time. I apologize for not being in the studio, but next time I will.
All right. Well, we are just glad you can join us on the air here like this on the phone, and we do it all the time, and we're very, very happy to have you here. And you also serve on other very important committees, the Veterans Committee and the Children's Committee. These are all excellent committees, and they all have a big impact on our day-to-day activities here in the state of Connecticut.
Yeah, my first chairmanship was of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee, which was a challenging time during COVID when I chaired the committee. And at the time, there was a lot of the National Guard and the state militia was utilized to put up COVID hospitals and a lot of other stuff. So it was an interesting time to chair that committee.
Those kinds of things do make it very interesting. I know when I chaired public health, it was during the horrible tragedy of Sandy Hook. And whenever you're involved in those kinds of incredibly different situations, it really leaves a big impact on you and, of course, how we manage those things on the state of Connecticut as well. And I know that we've come through that really big difficulty with COVID. And people are still getting back to normal in some ways because of the changes in our interactions for years.
Exactly. So, it's interesting. You say you're District 49 and I'm 50. You have one community. I have 7.
I know.
But the same number of people every representative represents. So
that's right.
I represent the towns of Woodstock, Pomfret, Brooklyn, Eastford, Ashford, Hampton, and part of Mansfield. So pretty much the Route 89 corridor in Mansfield, in addition to the other communities.
So yes, you share Mansfield with Representative Haddad,
Correct.
and we're neighbors because I'm right next door to Mansfield. So
that's right.
We are neighbors, and you know, one of the things that is really important for us as neighbors here in Eastern Connecticut is to work to make sure the rest of the state knows that Eastern Connecticut's here.
Right. No, we have definitely unique issues. And as you well know, there's a lot of talk about Fairfield County and our urban centers and suburbia, but we're one of those areas that is, truly rural in some parts and has, interesting urban issues that people don't think of it as an urban area as well.
Very, very true, particularly here in Willimantic.
Correct.
Oh, Susan's giving me the go sign, Pat, and I just wanted to point out. I pointed out I was bragging because I've known you longer than she has, and you know why? That's because you were a guest on my TV show, which is called Town Talk.
Yeah, I did a couple of times.
You did. You were. Some of the people that were running for office back then were a little evasive, but you were always willing to be on the show, and I really appreciate that. And you did a great job. You did a great job. You were a great guest, and I'm really excited to have you on the show now. And now you've been in the legislature for 8 years now? 7.
No, it's actually been at the end of this term, the end of 2026, it'll have been 10 years.
10 years. Okay, you'll be a 10-year man, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Anyway, I remember you being on that show, and that was, you came into the studio in North Windham a couple of times, and
And
that's
when we ran out of things to talk about, we talked about baseball.
or well, I always do that. Well,
He is Mr. Baseball himself, actually.
Yeah,
Well, you're amongst friends with that regard, then.
yeah, I know that. Well, we have a lot of interest in common, and I noticed how you and Susan were talking about this part of the state being a little bit unrecognized. But I'll tell you what, with you representing the 50th and her in the 49th. This is not a quiet corner anymore, and it is Governor Lamont and all of the people in the state government. They all know who you are, and they know who she is, and they know who what Windham is, and Mansfield, and Pomfret, and Ashford, and all those great towns you represent. In fact, Pat, I've been town attorney in 3 of those towns that you represent: Mansfield,
that's right,
Ashford, and now I'm newly town attorney in Eastford.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the duties of the town attorney is you're going to have to come out to Eastford for Duck Day at 7:30 in the morning on the town green on Groundhog's Day, when Scramble the Duck will come out and tell us if there's going to be 6 more weeks of winter or an early spring or not. So
that would be so adorable.
I have known all about that for many years because, Pat, they do an annual visit to the Wayne Norman Show here in Willimantic on Duck Day. Yeah. And I also know it's the what do you call it? Oh, guy, one of the selectmen is connected to it. What's his name?
Yeah. Well.
Anyway.
I'm not.
Torcellini, the Torcellini family.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's right. And that is a great day in Eastford, and I definitely will make it a point to get out there.
Hey, so Pat, just a little bit of background for the listening audience. I want to just go into what you do here. You're a teacher in the Pomfret School. Tell us a little bit about your teaching background.
So career educator. I started after 4 years at the great Eastern Connecticut State University.
All right, and I'm an alum as well.
I did a short-term gig in Sterling, a little small K-8 community school. And then ended up working at the Rectory School in Pomfret, which is a 5-9 junior boarding school. And then for the last 20 years, I've been at the Pomfret School, which is a high school and postgraduates. Taught history and social studies, and now mostly work with student life. So I'm the associate dean of students. So we deal with everything from the residential program to discipline to leadership programs. Day-to-day stuff, but I still teach a course. I do a series of American government electives. So this term we're teaching constitutional law, which there's no shortage of interesting, relevant topics in the world on that. So it's good to be able to take the practical side of government, working through bills, and then get a bunch of high school students and put bills up on the board and hear their take on it and all that. So it's certainly made my teaching of government more interesting serving in it.
Well, you graduated from Eastern, of course, and you know Willimantic really well, Windham, and
sure.
You also have a master's degree from Sacred Heart University.
Yep, Sacred Heart in education. Did it part-time while teaching, and Eastern was a great experience, and the Sacred Heart grad program was a good experience as well. And since I've been in the legislature, being able to work on higher ed issues, obviously UConn and Eastern, but really the community college system as well, and Quinnebog Valley, which I know is a branch in Willimantic, and the main campus in Danielson. There's a lot of work and promotion on the community college side that we have to do to try to make that better. So it's been rewarding to give back in that regard.
I'm very pleased that we have all these. This is really an educational area where you look at UConn, Eastern, the Quinnebog Valley Community College,
sure.
which has joined the state university system now. It's great, and it's a great area for all different types of things that we can do. And I just wanted to also check in with you a little bit about how you're active volunteer firefighter and emergency responder, and that fits in with your chairmanship, I think, with the Public Safety Committee.
Yeah, long before I got into politics, I joined the local volunteer fire department. in Pomfret, town about 4,000, completely volunteer. They needed people. Went into the firehouse with another colleague, signed up, and it's 19 years later, and for me, it's one of the best experiences ever, because it teaches you critical thinking skills in no other way. And it's a way to truly give back to your community. We talk about like neighbors helping neighbors. Well, literally, when you call 911, someone is probably having one of the worst days of their life. And the people who show up at the door, right, in many of our communities are volunteers. Not all. And certainly our area, our career departments, which are very good, they're mutual aid or volunteer departments. So, I did that, and it became really a natural role after I was the Veterans Chair to go to public safety, and work on areas that I know what it's like to be on the practical side of it. So I've enjoyed that.
Well, Pat, you were also an Eagle Scout yourself,
Yes.
And you were a Scout Master. And, I don't know how you do everything you do. I think you are living proof of the old saying that if you want something done, ask a busy person.
Yeah, well, sometimes I question that myself. But, there's something, being an Eagle Scout and going through the scouting program as a kid, taught me so many things. And I like to thank, public service and there's a merit badge called Citizenship in the Community and Citizenship in the Nation. Citizenship in the world, right? That basically boils down to get involved, right? And so having become an Eagle Scout, and I was always a big believer in summer camp. I enjoyed my time going to camp as a kid in Ashford, and as an adult, being a teacher with summers off, I was working as a camp staff member at the June Norcross Webster Scout Reservation in Ashford, and I became the director in 2006. And even with my legislative service, and I've been able to kind of continue that. And there's a great team of people there. There's great volunteers and scouts, which are both men and women now, attend the camp from all over Eastern Connecticut, including Windham and Mansfield and the surrounding. One of the strongest troops in the area is from Hampton. It's a great active troop.
You got Eastford, and I talk a little bit about Eastford because I'm new to Eastford.
Sure.
And I'm really impressed. I'm really impressed with Deb Richards and Mr. Torsellini, and I think the other selectman is Ashlyn, and she is
Ellsworth.
Ashlyn Ellsworth, and she is I believe she works in the school system.
Yeah.
And she's also a little league. She's also a little league coach, and I was in little league for over 3 decades. And again, I can relate to your resume and what you do, because when I was a little younger, I've been out of little league for about 3-4 years now because of my because of the arthritis in my knees. But I'll tell you what, when I was doing that. And I was judge of probate, and I was representing Ashford, Mansfield, Andover, Chaplin. John McGrath, who succeeded me as probate judge, said to me, "How did you do all that?" I said, "You know what? I don't know." And so I can relate to you so well, Pat. For just looking at all the things that you do, it's just amazing. I don't want to keep repeating that, but my God, you are a busy guy.
But they're also, I found that sometimes I think, all right, it's time to pare back, but you have an impact and an impact on you and all those different spheres that are different, and I could never do the same thing every day. I got to have, variety is the spice of life, and to be able to do lots of varied things makes it easier and better to do those things. I think you do a much better quality.
I get it. I always felt coaching youth sports, and I always focused on girls because when I was a young man, there were no real local sports for girls. It just wasn't happening. There was no little league for girls. There was nothing. I mean, girls would play with dolls, and boys would go off and play sports. And I when I got to an older age, when I got to be an adult, I said, that's not right. That should change. And there was already a movement on to include young women more in sports. But I got into it in 1983. Started the girls program here in Little League softball, first one in the area except for Norwich. And I'll tell you, it's one of the most gratifying things I ever did is to give those kids the opportunity to play ball. You gave kids the opportunity to play ball. You coached them. You worked with them.
I umpired for a little bit when I wasn't coaching.
Yep, and me too. I did that too. In some ways, umpiring was easier, but coaching is a lot of responsibility. But my view is, you're an educator. I believe that's a big part of their education. You can learn things doing that you don't learn in the classroom.
Well, same thing. It's the reason I think scouting is so important.
Yep.
You learn things in the outdoors and working as a team than you just do in a classroom. So.
Well, you just hit the nail right on the head talking about working as a team, because you know what? People need to work together, and you know that. You're in the legislature. You're working together with there's 150 other state representatives you have to work with, plus the state senate, because they're on the committees, and you have to know how to work together, and you're so successful at it. You became a committee chairman of an important committee, and that is a real tribute. And we're lucky to have you as an Eastern Connecticut person down there chairing that important committee.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and it's about bringing people together, right? I mean, it's no news to anybody that this is a really polarized time right now. There's a lot of strong opinions, but some of the best work in the legislature is work that is done, across the aisle. Because I still think Connecticut is different than the feds.
Oh yeah.
But you have to bring people together, and even if you don't agree, let people be heard, and use that dirty word called compromise.
Yeah, and you can't take anything personally. It's all about the issues, and
that's right.
Sometimes it takes a while for people to learn that, especially when they're younger. But it's nothing personal. It's all about getting things done, and so, there's different ways of getting things done, and that's that takes intelligence and experience, and that's good.
So that's an excellent thing, and being a part of a team, whether you're in your committees or in the legislature in general, that's such an important aspect of how we all get along, and that's why it's so important for us to have not just guys play sports, but also women and girls learning about sports.
Absolutely.
It's that team spirit comes through, and it really helps with employment as you get older. It's a big deal. So I really appreciate all that work that all of you do with team sports.
I just wanted to clarify what I said earlier about what my role is with the Willimantic Police Department and the Willimantic Fire Department, Pat. We have a special committee called the Willimantic Taxing District Board of Directors.
Special Service District,
That's right. And what we do mainly is we are actually kind of a board of finance for police and fire. And in order to do that, we have to learn all about what the police department does to the extent we can, because they do so much, and the fire department. And so I've learned an awful lot in the past several years, especially the past 2 years. And for part of the last year, I acted as the chairperson of the group, and I've given that up because I want to give it up to a younger person. And in fact, I've been replaced by Adam Lee Richardson, who's an excellent guy who he's a political director for Joe Courtney's campaign.
He's done a lot of work in the past, and he's a Brooklyn, Connecticut native.
That's right. Right. He's from out your way. That's right.
Yeah. No, that's good, and it's good to see younger people getting involved. I'm about to turn 45.
No, you're just a puppy.
And on some town commissions, I serve on our fire district board.
Yep.
I'm still one of the youngest guys.
Yeah.
So it's good to see other people get involved.
Yeah, well, you're right. It's good to see the younger people get involved. But anyway, the role I play on that group is very, very important. I've learned so much about what a great police department and a great fire department we have, and how well they're run. How well they're run by the chiefs and deputy chiefs. It's amazing. We are so lucky here in Willimantic, USA, to have such great fire department and great police department.
Yep, I would agree with that.
Yep.
Yeah, we are very lucky, and that's so true. I just wanted to kind of switch a little bit over to kind of legislative talk, and
shop.
Talk a little shop, yeah. And I'm really proud of the work that we did during the session to try and make up for some of the cuts from the federal government to the state of Connecticut, and making sure one of the things that we still have an opportunity for is for people to register for the Affordable Care Act, and that they'll be able to get some subsidies and have their actual premiums cut down lower than they would be if we just let the federal money go away and not do anything about it.
Sure. Sure. Well, even before the federal cuts, which
Right.
are devastating to healthcare, like the issue, right, in our region, and I think the country, is healthcare. And I
Right.
think it becomes even more complicated due to the largely rural nature of the area. And, we could talk for the next hour about, kind of Wyndham Hospital and Hartford Healthcare and, questions about services being, that's,
Right.
we could talk about that, but it's a larger issue than just that. My district is served by both Wyndham Hospital as well as Day Kimball, right, which is really difficult. Day Kimball to stay afloat. It's one of the last independent hospitals in the state, right? And so this session, we worked on being able to connect UConn Health, right, which is, one of the larger networks, but not nearly as big as Hartford Healthcare or Yale, to kind of begin the process of Day Kimball becoming part of it, which I think is a win-win as well. But we need to be talking about healthcare, and if the feds aren't going to take the lead on it, we need to, because we're facing almost a desert, and if folks don't have health insurance, it's going to drive costs up across the board. So, even though I tend to be a pretty moderate blue dog Democrat, I'm starting to come around to the fact that, maybe we need to explore some of these options that we've not done before. Maybe there needs to be a public option. Maybe we need to compel some of our insurance companies based in the city of Hartford to be able to offer low-cost plans, because I'm afraid the whole system's going to fall apart if there's not offerings, and if people don't have insurance, they're going to be more reluctant to go. So this is the issue of our time, in my view.
I agree with you 100%, and I was very pleased to see during that session that UConn and Day Kimball Hospital will have a partnership. It will be a public-private partnership, which is a little bit different than, say, just all public or all private nonprofit or private for-profit. But it really does give an opportunity for us to take a look at what happens when you combine a private sector issue group with a public sector group, and it will help, I think, all of them. And they're expanding their base by adding Day Kimball, Waterbury Hospital, and Bristol Hospital. So
and it's going to make the whole system more sustainable.
Yes.
And that's going to benefit the taxpayer. And knowing we have a research university and a medical school, to attract more people. I mean, like I said, recently, I ended up in the hospital and at Day Kimball, which they were wonderful. And then I did some outpatient stuff at John Dempsey Hospital, UConn Health in Farmington, and it was my first time there. And that's a wonderful facility as well. So we have a good nucleus here, and I know Hartford Healthcare and Yale New Haven, these are solid systems as well, that we just need to maybe do a better job of kind of collectively working together, figuring out where our deserts are, and making healthcare affordable for folks who need it the most. And that's the hardest part.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, when you take a look at the reimbursement systems, you take a look at the reimbursement rate, say, for the Medicare or Medicaid system, the only overhead cost is about, for Medicare, is less than 5%, and Medicaid's even just at cost. So of the processing of the claims and so on. But when you take a look at the private sector, that's nonprofits and for-profits, and the insurance industry, they get up to 20%.
Right. Well, and as you know,
those claims,
right. As you know from your public health days, the number one concern of ambulance companies, both commercial, private, and volunteer, is what are their reimbursement rates.
Right.
And we haven't gone up in years in that regard. And these folks are providing a necessary service, and the volunteer network is shaky right now. And we need to figure out a way to up their reimbursements so that they can continue to provide adequate coverage. And, ambulances like the Willimantic Ambulance, right, which is staffed by a professional team, I bet you if you look at their calls, they're going farther and farther outside of the city limits and responding mutual aid to other places that are still relying on volunteers. So it's a very fragile system right now.
Right.
And in public safety, we're trying to figure out how to sustain both law enforcement, knowing that the state police ranks are smaller, the volunteer fire service and commercial You know, like where do we get better overlap? You know, how do we start transitioning when appropriate to having some career departments or career staff to supplement volunteers, and then EMS as well. And it really, in my view, comes down to money and what the reimburse is. But it's a very fragile first response system right now, and we're working with all these stakeholders in the committee to try to recruit and retain good people to those roles. And particularly in the fire service, what happens if a community gets to the point where they don't have enough volunteers, and how do we prevent that from happening?
And we'll be looking at that right here. Dennis?
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in on a lot of, well, you guys are making a lot of great points, and my experience with the fire department here, I mean, the Willimantic Fire Department takes care, for the most part, of the Wyndhams outside of Willimantic,
sure.
and also, Pat, they serve Chaplin.
Right.
Which is another town that I have. I'm a town attorney in Chaplin, and of course Doug Dubitsky is the state rep, and
Sure.
and you hit the nail right on the head. They're going farther out, and they do a wonderful job. But I'll tell you, within Wyndham, the latest we heard was that there's a majority of the people who live in Wyndham are on Medicaid. And the fire department and the fire chief and deputy are very much concerned about what's going to happen if the cuts to Medicaid actually go through.
Sure.
Well, it's not just the cuts.
Real.
Let me just be clear about that, because the Medicaid, the people on Medicaid will, the cuts to Medicaid have to do with the fact that they are having to reapply every 6 months instead of every year. So when they do that, they're going to be bounced off if they don't apply properly. If they do apply properly in our systems, I'm on Human Services, we're setting up systems to try and make sure that they get the information, to make sure that they apply, that the homeless shelters, that the agencies that serve people like our federally qualified health centers, that they are actually in a situation where they can make sure that everybody's getting those applications in on time. And also the late filing, they've been reduced from 3 months to 1 month. So all of these things are going to go into putting a lot of pressure on providers that serve the Medicaid population. And in Wyndham, we have a little bit less than 25,000 people, but 13,800 people of the people in Wyndham are on the Medicaid program. And so it is a concern, but I think that's great. We're all on the awares. We're going to try and make sure we keep everybody informed that while they're not necessarily ineligible, they just have to make sure that they apply and go through their reconsideration now every 6 months as opposed to every year. And of course, that adds a huge amount of pressure on the State Department of Human Services, because that huge pressure, with not as many staff members as we need really to make sure that those applications are processed properly, are the things that we'll have to be looking at. And then the other thing is, already more than 75% of the people on the Medicaid program are working. 25% are on disability or elderly, and some of the age changes for disability or the age change for not having to work have created some difficulty. We have yet to establish in that circumstance whether or not we will lose people or not in that situation. We're still working on the data, so it is going to be complicated. But we're here and we're ready to fight, and we're ready to make sure everybody's informed. But with that said, I'm getting the notice that we want to hear a couple words from our sponsors, and we will be right back after these messages. This is Susan Johnson. I'm here with my co-host Dennis O'Brien and our very special guest, State Representative Pat Boyd from the 50th District.
Hey, Dennis O'Brien back on Let's Talk About It with a wonderful guest known for many years, Pat Boyd. He is the state representative from the 50th District, serving Ashford, Brooklyn, Eastford, Hampton, Pomfret, Woodstock, and most important to us here at WILI, Mansfield. Pat, you represent the eastern part of Mansfield.
Yeah, so pretty much the Fenton River to the Chaplin line. It's a big rectangle on the Route 89 corridor. So.
Yeah, I just looked at the map. There's a map on the.
It's very nice, yeah.
On the legislative website, and it shows the district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. So we want to get back to Public Act 490 and talk a little
Yeah.
bit about that work that you've been doing on that and what's coming
So
up this session.
Yeah, there's been a lot of chatter, particularly on the internet, about Public Act 490, to which most people are like, well, what's that?
Right.
And it's in effect, and I'll try to outline it. In 1963, right, the legislature passed Public Act 490 that basically said that farmland and open space is going to be assessed its value not by what it is, but how it's used, right? So if you have an open space and you're going to keep cattle on it, that means something. If it's swampland that's part of a pasture, that's something else, right? So there's all these categories of how farmland predominantly is used, and then every 5 years it's reassessed with a lead through the Department of Agriculture, and they come up with values for the land, and then they hand those values per acre of the land and how it's used to the municipalities, who then use it for their tax assessment purposes. And we haven't heard much about it this time around. The numbers came back, and to many people, the numbers seem really high. And I looked at them and said, "Wow, we're going to go from under $100 an acre for swampland to $900 an acre." And it's tied to a formula that assesses based off what land values are as a whole. And as you know, and when towns do reevaluations, there's a lot of people have sticker shock because their property is worth way more than it was before. And then Board of Finances have to set the mill rate at a certain level, and a lot of times you're reducing the mill rate, but your taxes go up, and it's a complicated system. And so, the assessments came out in October, and it started to raise eyebrows by a lot of folks. And the way it was done is the Yukon Agricultural Extension reached out to all the 490 lands, asked people to do a survey, how are you using your land? It came back. They used a contractor, which is Farm Credit East, which is a big lender to farms. There's an office in Dayville. And they put all the data into the formula, handed it over to OPM, Office of Policy Management. They came up with numbers and then communicated them. This is not something that was done legislatively. We didn't vote on this. We didn't change the law. There's some misinformation out there suggesting that the legislature vastly changed the law in this area. So the question of the methodology has come up. And so DOAG did a revision maybe about 3 weeks ago, but some of the numbers are still off. And some folks have brought some media attention to it. There's a lot out there on social media. In my conversations with the Connecticut Farm Bureau, which is the advocacy group for farmers in Connecticut, it's a great organization. Each county has a sub-organization. Actually, Paul Larson from Woodstock is the president of the Connecticut Farm Bureau. DOAG and the governor's office, and they're taking a hard look at all the numbers. And they're saying, there's something up here that the formula isn't working. Because the idea was for 490 was to protect farmland and encourage it, as opposed to making it an attractive use to sell it to a developer, right? And so it doesn't seem like these numbers that have come out are in the spirit of why the law was created in 1963, to protect farmers and to have it valued lower, because, the cost of farming is very difficult and the profit margins are very tough. And, one bad frost, if you're an orchard, you have problems your whole year. The milk prices fluctuate big time on the global market. And so, my understanding is that, the governor is engaged in this and should be weighing in next week on, trying to fix this and dig into the methodology and why are these numbers off. It's really not a political issue, and unfortunately, some of the chatter on the internet has suggested to make it a political issue and, make it a partisan issue. It is a bureaucratic issue, and the methodology was flawed. And I've had good trust in the DOAG over the years. Brian Herbert, the commissioner, is an Eastern Connecticut guy. He's from Tolland, represented a number of these towns for years, and they're working on it. But it is an election year, and silly season, I guess, is coming early this year.
Well, yeah, I know Brian Hurlber is very, very passionate about agriculture, and he's been there on any time anybody has questions. He comes out, he talks to the people out here, he goes everywhere all over the state on these issues. So I know he'll be working really hard on that. And the other thing about this is one of the things I learned when I first got to the Capitol was the fact that how important the agricultural land is that we have. And back then, my understanding is we only had about 3 days of fresh food available to the people. And if we had a problem with supply chains and shutdowns, we'd be out a lot of food. So keeping the agricultural business here.
Oh, it's huge.
It's gigantic, yes. It's
well, even our urban colleagues recognize that food doesn't come from grocery stores. Right?
Exactly.
And so this is a shared issue.
Yes.
And so and if there's any listeners out there that are 490 landowners, the governor is engaged, and I think you will see some movement on this early next week.
I know. I mean, I come from a very rural area in Maine originally, and so I was very cued into agriculture and the fact that how it works. And my grandmother's always had gigantic gardens and everything. But it's one of the things that I noticed when I started living around here that everything was kind of like from the grocery store. And I thought, oh, so when I was raising my little one, I would bring her around to show her the farms and that kind of thing, and just show her where the food was coming from. So I think that's an important thing to do as well.
Well, I'm a city boy, Pat. I grew up in New Britain. And the first I heard of the 490 program was when I was town attorney in Ashford. We had a few 490 issues. But I didn't know all this stuff you just talked about, the origins of it in 1963. That is not something I ever had to deal with, and I'm glad for you to educating me on that. I expect now that I've heard what you had to say, and I do represent Eastford and Chaplin, and there's some farms in Chaplin. Probably the farther east you go, well, to a point, there'd be more farms, and there used to be farms in Windham. In fact, my mother, who was born in 1915, told me that she grew up on a farm right in New Britain, Connecticut, because back in those days everybody had farm animals, and they were very self-sufficient. And even I can remember when I was a kid, there were no supermarkets. There were neighborhood grocery stores that were small, and they always had a meat cutter there and whatever. But it was not the same. But anyway, it's really thank you for the warning about 490. And if I hear from Deborah Richards, I will know now what's going on. And
I've heard from a few folks, from Eastford and from those places. Again, it is, as you well know, we have a bureaucracy, we have systems, and sometimes those systems don't work the way that they were intended, and that's where the legislature gets involved, and says, all right, maybe this methodology is not serving the purpose anymore because land values have skyrocketed. So it's incumbent upon us then to come up with a methodology that serves the intent.
Yeah, values went up around here a lot recently, everywhere actually, but in Windham it went up even more because we did a lot of construction projects here in Windham. When I was on the town council recently, we did a new community center. We renovated our high school. We have the Shubu stage now with all these great acts coming in. Yep. And we have a brand new, relatively new parking garage on Main Street. And those projects were overdue as far as I was concerned, but it did cause, you talked about revaluation, it did cause a fairly substantial tax increase.
It did not cause this. I'd have to disagree there because the tax increase was actually caused all over the state of Connecticut. Why? Because all over the state of Connecticut, we didn't have businesses that increased their value at the same time our residential properties occurred. And so blaming the great things that we've done on the tax increase, while there may be some small aspect of that, the increase on the residential properties because of the housing shortage we have at 110,000 units is actually part of the supply and demand issue with housing, and it really is part of the problem with our tax increase in every single town in the state.
Well, and we could talk for the next hour. We joked before, but we could talk the next hour about the reeval system and flaws with it, and that whole thing as well, because it is complicated depending on what type of property you have.
Well, Pat, you said the magic word. It is complicated. Our systems, like even the 490 system, they're complicated, and you can't expect everybody to understand those things. Even the people who work with them every day. That's one of the problems we have with government. Government is very, very important. We provide all kinds of vital services to the towns and to the people, some of which they don't fully appreciate. But I'll tell you, the complexity is gotten more
will
complicated.
tell you, as a legislature, we all, I know things that based off my own life experience, and Susan does as well. But there's a lot of things I don't know a lot about.
Yeah.
Right. And so when a constituent first wrote to me about 490, and then I started to read stuff on the internet. Well, what did I have to do? I had to do my research.
That's right. Your homework.
Right? And so I did my research. I talked to the great people in the Office of Legislative Research, which do a wonderful job. The attorneys up there helping us find information. So I spent a couple days doing my own research, talking to the ag commissioner, talking to people, and then, I think I have a handle of the issue now, and then we can go out and talk about it in a thoughtful way, as opposed to who caused this problem. It's more, what's the problem and how do we fix it?
Well, it makes it a lot harder for people in government today. The internet is very valuable. It's a very great tool. I use it in my practice, my law practice. Without a computer, I don't think I could do what I do. But the internet does. There's a lot of information on the internet that is absolutely not quite accurate, and that causes a lot of problems too, and makes it harder.
Yeah, the other problem we have is I think that we come into the Capitol thinking that all the towns are being treated equally, and many times they're not. And so understanding that every single town has its own system in terms of how it operates, every town has its own demographics, every town has its own economic base, or lack thereof. And these are the things that make every single town we have to be careful in terms of our the legislation we pass, because we have to take a look at how it impacts all the towns. And so
and what a mill rate goes for varies greatly in the community. And I've had people look at me like there's lobster claws hanging out of my ears when I tell them that the mill rate in a town like Eastford, since we're talking a lot about Eastford, right, is an elementary school, some public works, right, a skeleton government, and it's no city water, no sewer, volunteer fire department, no police, right? Regional ambulance, regional paramedics. Like, they don't understand if you come from, Bridgeport or, there's
West Hartford
or Willimantic.
Right. And there's no commercial base. So a lot of these towns, the primary taxpayer on the property tax is a resident.
Yeah.
And so people, need to understand that things are vastly different in suburbia and the Gold Coast and rural areas. And, and then you start adding into like Windham or Mansfield, where there's a heavy university state hospital presence, right, on land that is not taxable.
Right.
Or a town like Voluntown, that a third of the town is the Patchogue State Forest, which is not taxable. Right? And these are all wrinkles that need to be considered, and that's why the one-size-fits-all often doesn't work.
Yep, and that's what I try to let people know when I talk to people here, but also when I speak in appropriations or when I'm in other committees, just so that people know the place I represent isn't anything like maybe some of the other people who are talking. Many people go to the store. They don't have homeless people who need $1 or $2 for a bite to eat, or they don't have the 3 homeless shelters that we have here in Willimantic. They don't have public housing that doesn't pay any payment in lieu of taxes or property tax. So all those things are things that
Right, so
everybody.
the pilot program becomes more important in
Right.
a community like Wyndham or Mansfield.
Absolutely. And then to think that there's 99 things that are in the pilot statute, but there's a lot of things that are not there. And I put in a bill one time to add everything else in, and it came out to $1.6 billion.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So that's like, that's where we are. That's the kind of thing we have to do. I
Yep.
want to give you, we're coming down. I can't believe how fast this has gone and what a great guest you are. I just want to have you have a chance to say a few more things that, are applicable to your district and what we're looking at. So go ahead. We got a little less than 2 minutes.
Yeah, no, I appreciate first having me on. We've talked about it for a long time, and again, I look forward to doing this again in the studio. This session is the short session. We go in a couple weeks, and we're done the first week of May. And we're not adopting a new budget, but we're adjusting one. And I think you would probably agree that the number one issue that I hear about is back to this funding. Are we funding our schools to the proper way?
Yes.
Is special ed? We did a lot of work on special ed the last couple of years, but in a town where somebody may move in that requires a lot of services mid-year, our communities is the money following the kid, right? And so that municipal funding, particularly around education, is huge. And, I've said this a ton of times since I was elected, that urban poverty and rural poverty are two different things. And we have a lot of tools in the toolbox for urban poverty. We don't use a lot of tools for rural poverty and rely upon our nonprofits to do that good work. And you mentioned a number of things, homeless shelters, those are all run by nonprofits.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
And we have some United Services, Access, T, and I could list, for the next hour, some great community partners, but we need to support them, because if they don't exist, then government will have to pick that up. And it would be more expensive for government to administer all these things directly than it is to partner, you talk about public-private partnerships, partner with a nonprofit who also has some other sources. So, this session, I think there's going to be a lot of talk, rightfully so, again, about special ed and how we fund education in our towns, and that's the number one issue, other than affordability, and we haven't talked a lot about that. But that is, I don't want any listener to think that that's not front and center, particularly around electric prices.
Yes, exactly.
But those are the issues I think that we would be smart to address this session.
I think that one of the things we don't really push and understand enough is to tell the people that when the state helps with the funding of the education, whether it's making sure that the education cost sharing grant is updated or a special education is fully funded, that their property taxes will go down, because it's not going to, and we've got to make those connections when we chat with people.
It's a state responsibility.
Yes.
And we need to keep reminding ourselves of that.
Yes, we do. And we need to make sure that everybody understands that their property taxes will go down if those things. Here we go. Thank you so much, Representative Pat Boyd.
Thank you both.
Thank you, Pat.
Yep. Thank you.